This is the session called Building a Digital Toolkit for Promoters. This session is for venues and promoters and anyone essentially that's not an artist. So if you're an artist looking for the session about building a digital toolkit, that's downstairs. Okay, we're gonna get going here. Thank you all for coming. My name is Sybil Bell. I run a boutique agency called I Like the Sound of That. We do brand partnerships in music. And this year we launched Independent Venue Week, which is like Record Store Day, but for venues. I'm joined on the panel by Martin Franklin and Shane Richmond. I'm going to give them both a chance to introduce themselves, and then we're going to find out exactly who's in the room, and then we'll get going. Martin.
Hi there. I'm digital producer at The Place, contemporary dance venue just down the road near Euston. I'm also program manager for a funded project called SHP Live, which is looking at developing live streaming for venues and artists, but from a creative point of view, as well as just sort of delivering stage work.
And Shane?
Hi, I'm a technology writer. I was a technology journalist for a long time, most recently with The Telegraph. And these days I'm a digital media consultant and a tech writer for brands like Intel, HP, and so on. And I still dabble occasionally in bits of journalism.
So that pretty much makes me the non-tech filling in a very tech sandwich because I'm very much a techno bimbo. Just so we've got some sense of who's in the room, are there any people that own or run venues here, please? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and 5. Can you just shout out, I know not everybody's comfortable doing this, but there's fewer people here, so don't be scared. Can you just give us a sense of who else is in the room, what your roles are? Festival? Sorry? Promoter? Any more promoters in the room? Okay, good. And can you just raise your hands if you consider that in the role that you have at the moment, do you consider yourself tech savvy? It's about, yeah, there's a lot of that going on. Okay, let's go the other way. Who really feels that they're here to learn and get some new tips because they don't think they're really exploiting technology enough? Okay, some of you put your hand up twice, so you're really not sure. So it's about half and half. That's a kind of good starting point. Fantastic. Do we need to ask any more questions of the audience before we start? Right, we've been given a really pretty hat. I don't know what that says about my wardrobe sense, but here it is. And we've got 4 topics in here, which we're going to rattle through. And we had a chat before we came out here, and we've decided that we would like for you guys to engage with whatever topic we're talking about as we go along, rather than store your questions up at the end. So I'm going to get Shane to go first and pick a topic.
Let's see what we've got. Okay, backroom office.
Backroom office.
Exciting. So this is the kind of tech that you might use to run your business, communicate with your team, clients, customers, and so on. It'd probably be useful to get a sense of what people are using already. Are there people who use Google Apps here? So Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Docs?
Can you put your hands up really clearly so it's perfect. It's much easier for us to get a sense
of. So most people. Fantastic. So we don't need to do that one. We can consider you pretty much up to speed on that. Dropbox. Oh, everybody's on Dropbox. Evernote. Okay. So what you'll know if you're using those kind of services is that we've moved into this cloud environment, which is where you're not storing files on the devices that you carry around with you. You're not storing them on servers in your office. They're stored on servers that are run by other companies like Dropbox or Evernote or Google. All that information pings around over the web and over mobile networking to whichever device you need it from at the time. At the moment, if you go and talk to the hipster tech types in Shoreditch, the thing they're most excited about is a service called Slack. Is anyone familiar with Slack? Anyone using Slack? Okay, so Slack is the thing that you should be looking for next, particularly because you're using all those services that I just mentioned. Slack is basically instant messaging, and if you've not used instant messaging on a computer, then you've probably used SMS, text messages on a mobile phone. Exactly the same principle. It's messages that you send backwards and forwards, either one-to-one or one to several people. It works very well because it allows you to communicate instantly. It also allows you to not be bothering people with emails. If you want something that one of 4 people in your organization has, for example, You could email all 4 of those people and create a job for each one of them to look at the email, think about what you need and reply to you. Or you could look at IM, see who's online, and just ping the person who's online and ask them for it. So IM services, instant messaging, is immediate and quick, which is great. What Slack builds in that makes it much more useful, and it's why people are so excited, is it taps into all these other services too. So if you ping a bunch of people in your organization and say, I need our future events list, which we've got in Dropbox, they can grab it from Dropbox and send it back to you within Slack. And you can then open it in Slack and look at it without having to go to Dropbox. The same thing works for Gmail, the same thing works for Evernote. It can pull files in from all kinds of places. So it talks to all these other different cloud services and allows you to continue your conversation while you're going.
Can I just interject and ask a question here? So for the people who are running venues and for the promoters in the room, that's not you can create your own group. So it can be a venue going out to promoters and whoever else is interested in putting on a gig saying we've got these avails in our diary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's aimed at organizations, so you probably want it to be groups that you're communicating with fairly regularly. So you could include groups that you work with on a regular basis, but you wouldn't want to keep creating ad hoc groups because you'd be permanently removing people from the system and adding new people in. But it works brilliantly for customers or for networks between organizations that are fairly continuous, that have a sort of continuous relationship going on. Martin, have you got anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I've got a couple to chip in, actually, just probably a step away from the edge that Sean's kind of just treading there with Slack, which is a project management system that we just started to use at the place, which is called Basecamp. So it's become quite well known for web development, and it's mainly because lots of people can access the information that's on it, but if you are working with an individual who's not a regular member of your team, you can invite them to join a specific project. So if it's a client, for instance, or someone who you might need approval from for a certain thing, you can just invite them to a particular bit of your project management space that applies to them, so they can't see all the other stuff that you're doing. But it's really good for teams in the same way that that Slack sounds like it is. It's a discussion board. It's a place to store files. It's a calendar. It's a to-do list, all that sort of stuff, all in one space. So it's brilliant for organizations with teams of people or other stakeholders that are within your organization that you're providing services for, say. The other one, which is a little bit similar, is Trello, which is like a task list, basically. You can share cards on Trello with people that you're working with and do some of the same sort of stuff. My last one is a little bit different. But it's about password management. I don't know how many other people struggle with, remembering all their passwords, particularly now as there's a bigger move that we make harder to remember and more complex passwords, for each of the services. There's a number of password management applications. Some of them work in the cloud as well, so you can have an app on your phone, on your desktop, which you can share the passwords for all the different services that you use. Can save a whole world of confusion and head scratching, or doing things like one organization that I know does, which is have a document on their central server called P-words that anyone can access anytime. Don't do that.
This is, sorry, just to chip in on that, since we're talking about cloud services, I'm sure most people are aware of the iCloud hack recently that exposed private photos of numerous actresses in Hollywood.
In no clothes.
Yes, in no clothes.
Surprise.
One of the big downsides of cloud stuff, as I say, is that you're not controlling this stuff. That's a great benefit, but it is a risk. And you have to be very on the ball with passwords for these kinds of services. So don't use the same password for more than one site, for example. Don't write passwords down. And also, if you can get into a routine of doing it, change passwords regularly as well. Because you will find that from time to time, even the biggest company will have data leaks. Somebody leaves a disk somewhere they're not supposed to, or a hacker gets into the system and steals stuff. And this stuff does get out there, and then it gets shared on the web. I found just this week, actually, that my email address and password for Gmail has been leaked on the web, but it's a password that I used about 5 or 6 years ago, and because I change it regularly, it's got no value to anybody. But this stuff does get out there, so changing passwords regularly is important.
Yeah, I store all my passwords in a spreadsheet called something really dull like statistics and analysis, so nobody's ever going to find
Very
that,
clever.
apart from just now, obviously. Your turn to pick something out of the hat. It's not really called that, but it's something like
Okay. So, next topic of discussion is analytics.
Analytics, woo! Brace yourselves.
Okay, so I'm sure that's got most of you kind of getting a little bit excited now, the prospect of analytics. So,
Can I, just before you start, does anybody measure their data online? How many people are visiting? Do you monitor what's happening? Do you monitor how much is? So put your hands up high so we can see. So it is important to you. So you're looking to see where your gaps are and where you can improve on things. Okay.
yeah, I think my kind of early career, I suppose, in the arts actually was as a promoter in a small venue, and what I've found doing that, and which I've sort of carried through when I've been booking other things since then, is actually in those days I knew my audience. I really knew my audience individually, and so it was a great kind of barometer of what might go over well with them next, and what sort of trends might be coming up that I could make a bit of use of. So I sort of think about analytics as giving us the opportunity to get to know our more widely spread digital audiences and actually think about individually what do they do. So the challenge which I'm quite often dealing with isn't just analytics in terms of how many people looked at this web page today. It's actually more like a wider view sort of campaign tracking, so that we can tie together all of the different outlets that we have and what kind of impact that each of them has, so we can then find out what will apply to our different audiences. So if you use Google Analytics, which obviously is the most popular and known service, there's a whole world of information in there that you can filter and sift in different ways. But initially, it doesn't really give you a very kind of personal view of what is your audience member doing. But if you sort of take that a little bit forward and use, for instance, an email campaign service, like MailChimp is one of the ones that is very big. A lot of people use that. You can actually put a campaign ID on your emails, so then that lets you track what your visitors do right from that email through to your website. You can see how do they navigate through your website and where do they end up. So that's a thought of something you can do to kind of expand your connection with your audience through analytics.
Does anybody not really use analytics, or not really? I probably wouldn't want to say out loud, would you? Don't really track anything. And for those of you that do, have you been able to use the analytics? Does that encourage you to go and get new apps or change the way that you're promoting particularly? Anybody got anything they'd like to share, so it's not just us? Okay, good. Shane, have you got anything to add? You have got something fantastic. There's a microphone just coming, Lovey.
Hiya.
Hi. Can you say who you are and where you're from, so we know?
Hi, I'm Geraldine, and I work for the French Music Expo office in London, so I help French bands come and invade you guys, play more. One of the things that, we use Google Analytics and MailChimp to identify it and improve what we do, but one website, I'm not sure if you're going to mention it or not, but I think is useful for promoters as well as for artists, is Music Metric. You can pretty much monitorize every artist's social media, YouTube views, and all that counts to kind of try and predict or see if an artist is trending or not. So for us, it's useful to identify if a French artist is trending somewhere and how, and if you're going to make it in the UK or not. But for promoters looking for like support bands, that kind of thing, I think could be really useful.
In terms of working out whether they're worth booking and if they're right to have in the venue, you mean?
Yeah. In terms of like how, trying to find like the next big thing, or just not the next big thing, but some cool bands that have like a following on the internet. I find Music Metric is it really have a lot of information in one place,
Yeah.
and it's a paid service, but the guys are keen to like make you have like a trial if you want to see if that's your thing or not. So I just thought it's cool for me. So might be for others.
And so for the other venues and perhaps the promoters in the room, how are you making the decision? I used to own a venue, I've been a promoter. How are you making the decisions on who you're booking? Because obviously you're getting incoming all the time, but you're obviously you're going to gigs and picking up on other things. What tools do you use to make the decisions as to who to book? Anybody want to share?
Active social media presence.
Active social media presence. Is it? And even though some of these social media stats can be manipulated, you're still able to see the activity that an artist...
I think if an act,
It's on.
I think if an act that hasn't been around very long has got a few thousand followers, they might have bought some. But you can also see from the interaction, and if people actually like their posts. It's changed in the last few months because some people hardly get their posts seen, and they have a lot of followers. I mean, I've got the same problem with my own business, Folkstock. So, but then you can look at their personal pages as well and see the interaction there, and retweets, and how active they are, and how often they tweet, and how often they post, and whether they're just spamming the same message or whether they're being creative.
Yeah.
If I book anyone for anything, I want to think that they're going to put as much effort into it as I am.
Okay.
So they've got to be active.
Sure.
That's my criteria. And other than being the sort of music that I want to promote and I want to have my name associated with, that's obviously a given. But within those people, then who am I going to put on? The ones that I think will respond and promote the event.
And put the effort in.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Shane, did you have anything to add?
It's not really analytics, actually, but it's something that you just made me think of with what you were saying there about social media presence. It is a problem for a lot of people. The Facebook algorithm is a slightly murky thing in terms of what it shows and to whom. And so there are lots of posts that people put up on Facebook that are pretty much not seen by anybody. The theory is that what Facebook wants to do is encourage you to pay in order to get your posts seen. And I'm sure most people who've played around with Facebook will have experienced that at some point. You have someone who seems to have been quiet for a while, and then you go to their page and find they've actually been posting stuff every day. But the thing that's happening recently that's just worth keeping an eye on is that Twitter are looking at bringing in a similar kind of algorithm. So Twitter will change its feed from just being the stream that you're used to at the moment to something that's more algorithm driven to give you the kind of posts that they think you're interested in. And obviously, their view of what you're interested in is determined to some extent by their advertisers and what those advertisers are paid to send to you. So there is the problems that you'll see on Facebook at the moment might be on their way to Twitter as well. So anyone who's kind of monitoring social media either for their own presence or for the presence of acts that they're working with and so on needs to be aware of how these things are changing and try and keep an eye on ways that you can stay ahead. And so that might mean drilling down below the default news feed, which is controlled by Facebook, into, on Twitter, for example, lists of particular people that you think are interesting influencers. Or on Facebook, it might be particular groups or areas where people you know congregate. So it's probably going to get a lot harder to monitor that stuff on social media.
Terrific. Do you want to take the one that's got the mark on? That's it.
Okay. Content. So I'm assuming everybody here has a website.
Anybody not have a
Anyone hasn't
website
got
for
a
their...
website that they...
Anybody not got a website? Don't be shy or embarrassed. Okay.
How many people have got websites that they built and run themselves? And how many people have something through something like WordPress or some sort of off-the-peg kind of service? I think what's interesting in the trend of those services over the last 10 years or so is that there has been a move to the off-the-peg things being much more powerful, much more customizable, and requiring much less maintenance from you, which I think, as someone who's worked in tech for a long time, I think is a very good thing indeed. I don't really think that people necessarily need to be running their own website, unless they want to, any more than they need to be running their own power generator or ensuring that they've got their own water supply. If you can find people who can do that for you reliably and cheaply, then I think that frees you up to focus on what it is that you actually do. So there are companies like Squarespace, for example, in the States, who are very, very good, who've designed a range of flexible templates. You can go pay them a fairly small amount a month. I think it's less than £5 a month. and they'll run the website for you. It's a very customizable template, so you could bring in your own designer if you want it to look exactly the way you want it, or you can just move some things around so it looks different from the default. You can then pay a bit extra to bolt on the payment platform if you're selling tickets or selling stuff through your website. And the whole thing is done and hosted through them. And they have, a service level agreement, so they're guaranteeing your website is going to be up for 99.9 whatever % of the time. And that's something that's out of your hair. And as the web services are maturing, there are many more of these companies that are coming forward. So instead of having to find a local business that can build a site for you and maintain it, this stuff is being done at massive scale by companies that can deliver it right the way across the world. So I would say that if you are managing your own website, what you want to be focusing on is the content that's on it, not whether it's working and which page is linking where and what the uptime is and that kind of stuff. And so I would be looking at these kinds of services that can provide it for you. And personally, the thing I recommend to my clients is Squarespace, but there are lots of others that are doing similar things now.
Martin, have you got anything to add?
I'm not sure if I have. At one point we were talking about something that you might say falls more into content marketing. So, producing little kind of assets that you can feed out on your social media channels. And I wonder if and what anyone in the room is using to do that. Anyone, sort of actively using Vine or SoundCloud, I would imagine would be quite interesting.
Anybody using those? I know it's the end of the day, but if we can all get involved, it'll just make it. You're going to learn from other people as well. It's not just us here telling you. So, did you you had your hands up over there? What do you use?
Vine and SoundCloud.
Oh, do you? Okay. And has that made a difference to?
Yeah.
But isn't this is kind of I call it cultural ADHD. We get really bored of things very quickly, don't we? Hey? Yeah, saturated. Whatever it is, like something comes along and it's the best thing since sliced bread, and we all use it, and we can't imagine our business without it. And then
Then I always go back to the old favourites. Like I'll always go back to Instagram after Vine, just like this way.
and then you'll go back to Vine at some point, and it'll go in this cycle, and then something new will come along, and then we'll drop everything. And I don't know about everybody. I get digital-ish, and I know that it's important. One of the reasons we set Independent Venue Week up was because so many people are discovering music in their bedrooms, on their phones, and on their computers, and it's like, what these bands need of all the things that bands can do, make their record in their bedroom and make an album, they still need to play live to a group of people. And, unless you're going to just keep playing to a really small number of people, you need to go and do that in a venue that's set up to do it, where there'll be an audience that are appreciative, and it's well run, and that people know what they're doing. And this digital stuff is hugely important, but just from a venue point of view and of nurturing that new talent, it can't be done in isolation. I don't think it's so important to have that, the in-person thing, and going to a gig and being spat on by the lead singer and falling over and a mosh. You can't really replace that. So I just think it's interesting that we do go in cycles with these digital things, and I think we're also going in some kind of cycle for gigs as well. People have dropped off the gig-going circuit as much. They don't go as much. They cram all their gig-going into festivals and see as many bands there as possible. So I think it's important to try and replicate that. I think we're going to come on to that in a minute when we touch streaming as well. Yes?
So my name is Jason Phipps. I'm from The Guardian, head of audio at The Guardian. Just have a question for the panel, sort of an observation. People are often sort of slightly blind to something that's very obvious, which is mostly people are accessing all these services and information through mobile. I'm amazed by how many people, and I'm guilty of that, which is obsesses about a desktop site and a desktop sort of replication of media, only to see a stats filter and realize that 75% of people went through the thing in my pocket. Do you think people are aware enough of the rise of mobile and the effect that will have on the digital toolkit?
I think that's something that probably feeds back to the brief topic where we covered analytics. That's the ideal way you can see are your visitors arriving at you on their mobile, and that's then a ideal way for you to be able to prioritize. Does your site work properly on mobile? What is the experience on a mobile-sized screen? And that sort of thing. So yes, mobile is an enormous growth area, universally. but yeah.
I think it's
depending on the audience.
it's an odd thing, and I think we are all aware of it because we're all on our mobiles and we know everybody else is on their mobiles, so we're all aware of it through what we do. And yet when people think of their website and what their website is going to look like, they do immediately go straight to what it will look like on a desktop or a laptop. This is something I should have mentioned really when I was talking about website services. A company like Squarespace, all of their templates automatically change their responsive designs, so they will work on your tablet or on your mobile without you doing anything else. And any modern web design should do exactly that. It should be flexible through whatever platform the audience is coming to without you having to do anything extra.
We've got another question.
Can I ask you a bit more about that system of using what was it called? Set Square?
Squarespace.
Squarespace.
Could you just say who
Specifically
you are and
that
what
Yeah,
you're
my name's Nod Knowles. I'm a general purpose promoter.
Okay.
I'm interested in how that how it works, how really the direct reaction, the direct relationship between the person who wants the website and the company running the website, that you described. Just how much interaction does there have to be? How much work? I mean, apart from writing the copy or finding the photograph and lobbing it to them, how much work does it entail for the person whose website it is to get stuff to or design change or whatever from the website organisation that you described?
So what they provide, and there are other companies that do a similar thing, and it works in the same way, as they give you a tool that you access through your browser that's basically just drag and drop. So you click on a box and you type into that box. You can then hit a button and see exactly what it looks like or what it will look like on the live website. You can drag a photo into a box and the photo will appear there. So they give you the template and say, here is how the design should look. And you can drag things into that template. If that's the most minimal layer of interaction that you need. If you want to go further than that, you can change the size of the boxes, or you can add more of them or fewer of them. You can tweak things like the colors, you can tweak borders and get into actually doing the design if you want to do that, but they don't force you to do that. So the most basic thing is that you're just putting content into boxes, and at the most complex end, you can really use it as a very straightforward web design tool to do anything you want to do. So it's what makes it so good for newcomers is that there is this whole path you can go along where you can do as much as you're comfortable with.
My own experience of actually operating anything like that is operating MailChimp, letters to send out, and even that, I mean, as a real dunce, I find it really quite difficult, quite clunky. I don't know if you would think that is really kind of old style technology, something like MailChimp, but just even setting up a simple letter to send out to people seems to me to be, you need to be a bit more savvy than I am in terms of using that kind of system. How much more sophisticated and how much more user-friendly are the systems that you're talking about?
It's probably a little bit more user-friendly, but you have to make your own efforts to find out exactly how it works. So if you're confused by something, they have vast amounts of help documents. Or you can,
forums are very good. If you go onto any forum, most of your questions, because I'm like you, no idea.
So
if you go on the forums, you'll get a lot of the answers there.
There's a bit of a learning curve, but they've made it as straightforward as anything I've seen so far. It can definitely be better, but it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, we're going to move on because we've got one more topic to cover. There's only one in the hat, so I have no idea what this is going to be.
Okay. So streaming. I think from our show of hands early on, we seem to have sort of 50% of the audience who are pretty tech savvy. So I'd be interested in your thoughts about streaming. From my point of view, I've been streaming things probably for about 4 years, I would say, starting from very sort of DIY approach, just streaming quite low quality over 3G. But the project that I am program manager for has now covered quite a sort of range of stuff, from dance performance. We streamed the Audiograph Festival in Oxford in February, and now it seems to be a potential in this area which is not widely being tapped, which is basically looking at what is the experience you're giving your audience And generally, it seems that if we point cameras at a stage production or a concert and sort of try to reinvent television, we somehow fall a little bit short of the mark, because there's an awful lot of potential that we could be tapping, given that we're broadcasting on an interactive platform. We could talk about all sorts of approaches to this, but the area that we are kind of excited about is actually a very sort of artist-led area, where it's kind of going into a sort of transmedia direction, where there's stories and parts of the narrative or parts of the audience experience that are actually cross-platform, and so the delivery of the video on the web is just a part of that experience. So, what if we were to sort of chat on a little bit more in a particular direction? What would you be interested in hearing? What sort of things have you tried or want to try?
Anybody? Yes.
Yeah, we're a live streaming company actually, and we're called Living Indie. We're pitching downstairs if you're interested in after 6 o'clock. But we live stream sort of indie themed concerts, and we've also been working on besides all the other things we're trying to do. We're very well aware that it presents a lot of opportunities. Like, for example, chat rooms and a social forum that lets fans connect with people. I think it's looking to exploit things that you can't get from actually being at the gig itself. Because clearly it's never going to be the same as being in a sweaty venue, jumping up down at the front by the stage. So yeah, it's trying to pinpoint the kinds of things that the technology allows you to do that you can't get from the venue itself. And I think there's a lot of potential there. But I think also lots of artists and lots of promoters, venues, all sorts, are still a bit kind of mystified as to what they don't really get it, and they don't quite see what its potential for making their money is. That's our experience so far.
Okay. And there was a comment down here as well, please.
Monica Ferguson from the Stables in Milton Keynes. We do 380 gigs a year, and actually live streaming is the one thing that we've talked about for a number of years, and we've never quite got off the ground for two reasons. One, licensing issues and what the cost to the venue is in terms and how you deal with that. And the second one is the speed and the technology that's required. So any guidance on that would be helpful.
Just taking the second question first, because it's the easiest one to answer. At the moment, I think we're in quite a nice grace period in terms of what the audience expectation is. Generally, I found that people are pretty excited that it works at all. So you need a kind of baseline of bandwidth so that you can upload video on, which you'd be looking at as a minimum, a sort of 2 megabit a second upload, and that will get you a sort of like a YouTube-sized video in reasonable quality. But I don't think at the moment, people are being sort of terribly critical about, well, the picture quality is a little bit rough on this, because they know it's live, and what it sort of lets us do is sort of lever the excitement of live as an experience. And in our events, what we find absolutely universally is that you get way more viewers after the live stream event has been delivered. So you need to deliver on a platform that gives you a video on demand capability. But it sort of talks about people being excited that it was live, but we're also used to catch-up TV and nothing being, so closely scheduled online. People will watch it when they come home from the pub or whenever suits them, and they like the fact that it was live, but they're not bothered about being there at 8 o'clock or whatever it is. So does that?
I've just had that as well. Can we do 1, 2, 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? Joking. So just before we finish, then we just thought I'd ask these guys for their thoughts on future gazing. Is there anybody else, from a promoter or venue point of view, do you have a wish list of things, a tool that's not yet created that would really make your life so much better? great, we've got everything we need. What have you seen that you think that these guys don't even know about yet that might come into their world that will help?
Well, I think it is something actually that everybody knows about, because it's the Apple launch this week where they launched the watch. And so suddenly everybody is talking about wearable technology and where that's going to take us. As is usually the case with these things, Apple are far from the first to be going into this space. They typically don't do that. The device that they've launched is a fairly classic Apple version 1 product in that it's got lots of things missing and lots of things that probably won't work as well as they will do in future. But the area of wearable technology itself is something that is only going to continue to grow. And because we're running out of time, I just want to talk very briefly about the idea of smartwatches. If you think in terms of somebody having a small amount of screen space on their body, probably on their wrist, that can receive a small notification. So it could be a tweet, could be a reminder that a show is about to start, it could be an ad, it could be something that's location aware, so it could be something that's delivered based on a venue that they've just walked past. It could be something that is delivering based on the fact that they just walked past the merchandise stand, for example, or giving them the prices at the bar, or telling them more about the support band that has just finished. So it can be location and time aware, and it can be delivered snappily onto their person rather than onto a device in their pocket that they're probably not going to want to take out and look at in the midst of a venue. I won't go on to the head-up displays and the various other ways that these things will be delivered, but being aware of wearable technology, also contactless payments through wearable technology, which is something else Apple has put into the watch. These are things that are going to come into consumer tech over the next 2 to 5 years and have quite profound impact.
They're getting closer to the stage, so I'm going to give Martin just 30 seconds to say something, and then we are promised finished.
Something which sort of aligns a little bit with the sort of wearable, very personal devices idea, which I think is potentially really exciting, is sentiment analysis, sentiment tracking. So it kind of, I don't know if it goes along with the Music Matrix system, but I've come across it. It's if you dabble in the stock market and like to sort of know what the mood of the market is about a certain company, you can buy a sentiment tracking service. And basically what it does is it searches social media for keywords associated with different companies and gives you an index of how people are feeling about that particular company. And I think there's some really interesting applications of sentiment tracking in terms of cultural organisations. Whether people can indicate how do they feel about your venue, and can that be registered? How do they feel about a certain artist or an experience they're having? So yeah, that's mine.